Good morning and good afternoon to everyone joining us today. I hope you're all well. Welcome to this Reuters events webinar titled Smart Logistics, Reducing Costs and Increasing Sustainability in Last Mile Operations. I'm Erika Musso, Project Director here at Reuters Events, and I will be your host for today's conversation. Today, I'm joined by Stephen Moelk, Fulfillment Project Implementation Manager, Zero Emissions Delivery from Ikea, Gina Anderson, Vice President of Solutions and Growth, Geodis, James Nissenberg, Vice President of Logistics from Santa Monica Seafood, and last but not least, Michael Cottle, Vice President of Global Sales and Customer Success from NextBillion.ai. Thank you all very much for sharing your time with us today. And if I could please ask you that you give a quick introduction to yourself and to your companies, starting with Michael. You're the first one in my screen, so if you'd like to, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. Thank you so much, Erica. Pleased to be here. So as you mentioned, I run the commercial operations at NextBillion, in charge of sales and customer success for the company. We're a software company that provides geospatial and mapping and routing functions to help organizations, as I simply put, deliver everything from a pizza, a person, or a package more efficiently and hopefully sustainably around the world.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you for being here. And next, James, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi, James Nissenberg, Head of Logistics for Santa Monica Seafood. We are a large, high-quality seafood and other related products distributor and processor out of the LA area, and we serve customers in 21 states. We do about 1,400 last mile deliveries on a good day, and have customers that range from large restaurant and hotel groups to large grocery chains.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, James. And Gina, if you want to go next and introduce yourself to the audience. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Erica, for having me. I'm Gina Anderson, and I head up last mile logistics for Geodis, their product City Delivery. We also have Geodis Zipline, which is a driver-enabled tracking application to track all of our deliveries in real time. And just happy to be here for this topic. Thank you.
And we're so happy to have you as well. Thank you, Gina. And Stephen, last but not least, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Thanks, Erica. So I'm Stephen Moelk. I'm, as you said, the Project Implementation Manager for Ikea's Zero Emission Delivery ambitions here in the United States, but that's part of a larger global goal to provide all of our customers with zero emission home deliveries by 2025.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your time with us today. And to the audience, I just want to make sure that you are asking questions to the speaker throughout the next hour, and we will try to answer as many as possible. We have some for them as well. In addition, we're running a poll throughout this webinar, so please be sure to submit your answer here, and then we can share them with the panelists to get their thoughts on them as well. I'm actually going to launch it now. So without further ado, let's get into the discussion. What are some of the biggest challenges currently presented for last mile delivery specifically? Let's start from Stephen. You were the last in the introduction.
Sure. So I mean, where do you start, right? There's so many challenges. There's there's vehicle availability and things like that, and there's getting finding the infrastructure, getting the infrastructure to match the vehicles, and but I would say that for our part, vehicle access for independent contractors has been one of the largest hurdles that we face, because IKEA doesn't own any of its vehicles today, and the contractors, the third-party logistics companies that we contract with, they typically don't own vehicles either, and so trying to provide access for these electric vehicles to the independent contractors or contract carriers that actually own today's trucks is a huge challenge for us. And then after that, the infrastructure is probably the single biggest challenge. Where to put it? There's long lead times for construction. It can be expensive. You have to right size it. So there are a lot of challenges around that as well.
Thank you so much for that, Stephen. We're actually gonna a little bit deeper on some of the things you mentioned. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Thank you, just spoilers. And then Gina, please go next. What are the biggest challenges?
Yeah, playing on what Steve said too, a little bit on the, finding the right, labor, right vehicle. We're more niche in the fact that, a brand might need, more of a scheduled delivery or more of an elevated delivery experience. And then when you, look at, say an Amazon or UPS or FedEx, and they can just drop at a door, but that's maybe not always sufficient. Probably even in James's world, you don't want to drop off and have it sitting in direct sunlight or something like that. So I think,
For sure.
right. Yeah. So I think one of the biggest logistics challenges is when a brand's trying to, differentiate themselves from the competition, or trying to, really find a last mile solution provider that can meet their needs. And then the last mile solution provider has a whole host of other challenges that they're going to be facing to, just play a bit on what Steve had already said. And I'm sure we'll dig into that a little bit deeper.
Absolutely. And James, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I think I was going to mention something a little bit different. On the plus side, I would say that the technology is good and improving. There's a lot of companies out there that have entered this space in the last few years, and if you just look at, for example, your grocery home delivery through different grocers, it's I find on the tech side it's a really good experience in terms of being able to schedule your delivery within a certain time window, and getting information on ETA that your order has been picked and that it's arriving soon, that type of thing. I think one of the biggest challenges for last mile delivery is actually on the cost side and determining how to serve customers efficiently and cost effectively. I mean, that's always been the challenge of last mile, since for 100 years, really, is, how do you build that density and that type of thing. And I think many operations are still subsidizing costs for consumers and figuring they'll make it up on the revenue side and on selling more product, but I don't think that challenge has been solved yet.
That's so true, James. That's really is the cost factor. And it's not getting any cheaper. I know James, you probably filled up your tank like I have recently. And, when you're pulling in and it's close to $5 a gallon,
Right.
And then you have a last mile delivery provider, maybe they are subsidizing. They're having to, for sure, having to subsidize. But yeah, great point.
Thank you so much for both of you. And to Michael, what are the greatest challenges for you from your perspective?
Yeah. I mean, obviously we're not an actual operator or delivery service or provide a product that needs to be delivered. But what we hear from our customers is their need, as Gina mentioned, as fuel prices go up, and other costs, labor goes up, eking out another 3 or 4% efficiency in time or number of deliveries per trip or deliveries per person becomes increasingly important. And at some point, this subsidization, as James references, is going to come to a head, and investors and others are going to say, hey, it's time to make some money here. And a lot of companies are being VC funded and being subsidized by that source of income. And at some point, they'll have to look at how they create the kind of efficiencies that an Amazon or UPS does. And some of that comes down to self-servingly some of the technology we provide that helps make that more efficient.
Definitely. Thank you, Michael. And to jump into the next questions, we've touched there somehow, but I'd like to go a little bit deeper on it if some of you want to. From an urban infrastructure point, what are the specific challenges? Whoever wants to go first. I think Stephen has something.
Urban areas present a whole scope of specific challenges: parking, access, freight elevators, tolls, restricted access to certain areas, vehicle sizes, and things like this that have to be scoped out in advance. So there's a number of different challenges in an urban environment that you don't see in a more rural environment. That said, in particular from my point of view, for electrification, there's there's little to no charging infrastructure available either. So from a sustainability point of view, it becomes difficult. But yeah, in New York City, where I've spent most of my career, it's mostly double parking or driving around the block while you're parking, traffic, trying to meet those delivery windows under those kind of circumstances is really difficult and inefficient.
Thank you for that, Stephen. And Michael, would you want to go next?
Yeah, I was curious to ask Stephen too. I mean, do you see that landscape of charging infrastructure changing? I mean, there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of obviously discussion in Congress about affecting that. Do you see it really changing quickly, or?
I mean, I do see it changing. I think, some of these, even with the some states banning the sale of ICE vehicles after a certain period of time, it's going to have to change. I think some of the initiatives on the curb space particularly are going to be very difficult for cities to pull off, just because there's so much competition for curb space already. So I think that becomes a challenge. I think maybe we see the reduction in vehicle ownership and maybe move towards other rental or sharing models. And I think maybe charging happens in more of a depot-like setting, or more of a kind of a multi-use charging hub type of setting, rather than on the street level. But that's just crystal ball kind of stuff right now. But it's definitely changing.
Perfect. And James, would you like to add something?
Sure, all good points made so far. I would add that, so we're talking about actually making the delivery as well. There's also the need for the distribution space, right? So you've got Amazon, all the companies trying to compete with Amazon, which has, small warehouses, cross docks, and distribution centers in every city in the country at this point. And, if you want to compete with them, either yourself or more likely through one of these other, regional 3PLs that's, trying to build out their own sort of distribution infrastructure, where do you do that? I mean, you've got shopping centers that have sort of been taken over as, local distribution hubs. So there's options out there, but that need for that distribution space so you can fill those customer orders and same day, next day type of thing, I think that's something to watch out for as well.
I would just add, Erica, to what James is saying, they're looking at alternative solutions. And one of the things that some brands are doing clearly is testing lockers. And I know some of the European countries have done a really good job in urban settings, making the lockers more efficient so that, delivery providers or multiple delivery providers sweep these lockers. This is something that I'm trying to build out for Geodis City Delivery, where the lockers are utilized not only for returns, but also, or picking up goods, but it also can be used for returning goods. Maybe not in James's world when you have, fish and seafood and things like that, would it be as relevant? But, certainly utilizing those lockers more in the communities, just like you would, the USPS, right, in a mailroom situation. And then everyone just knows, they just know that this is, I don't have to get in my car. I don't, I can walk to it just like I'd walk to my mailbox. And just getting that mentality. I know in California, we're so reliant on our cars and our vehicles and but certainly if I didn't have to drive in a bunch of traffic and there was a locker and I wanted to return something, I'd certainly go there first. Or for that matter, if I don't want to do a BOPUS or something like that, I'd and there was a convenient locker, even at my grocery store, so to speak, I would definitely utilize that as a consumer. So that could be a positive, actually.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, Gina. Thank you for that. And to jump to the next question, where, well, we have lots of space, but as well, the distances are very long. Well, I'm talking about the rural deliveries. So what are the strategies that can be employed to reduce costs in this context? Stephen, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, rural deliveries, I mean, are the best way to reduce cost in any kind of delivery situation is to share the assets and share the costs with as many packages of deliveries as possible, right? So when you're talking about rural deliveries versus city deliveries, the problem is not density. You've got plenty of density in urban areas, right? So you can fill a truck or you fill up as many trucks as you like. It's just a matter of how they're going to present the items to the customer. in a rural setting, you maybe have a lot more choices on how that item is handed over to the customer. Parking is not a problem, but the density becomes a problem. So, that's really the key. That's where, a lot of these companies, third-party logistics companies and others, they can kind of aggregate your packages with other people's packages, like a FedEx or UPS does every day. And they can, you can share the cost of those assets. So for us with like big and bulky items, finding a provider that has some density in that area that can offer you a lower price because your goods are riding on the same truck as 15 other customers is the best way to reduce costs specifically.
Thank you for that, Stephen. And over to you, Michael.
Yeah, I was going to ask again, Stephen, if you see an opportunity for elasticity in pricing for customers who are willing to sort of wait 2 days for a bulky item versus more immediate delivery, which helps your, the efficiency of your deliveries.
For sure, yeah. The longer you wait, you can build more route density in less dense areas for sure. And like Gina and James were talking about before, giving customers those choices, we're seeing a lot more of those choices start to kind of present themselves to customers. What do customers really want? Do they want to take it home themselves? Do they want, expedited delivery? Are they willing to wait a couple of days? Those types of things. And I think, customers appreciate the choice and appreciate the, the kind of the cost ladder that comes with that.
And the follow-up to that, are you doing anything in terms of, calculating or providing the carbon impact of that? If they wait versus if they get it immediately, those kind of things.
Not yet, but I think it's a good idea. In fact, I think that like the, as this conversation moves towards the sustainability angle, that that I don't think that reducing carbon footprint or the kind of the greening up of home delivery has been thoroughly market tested yet. I mean, FedEx and UPS and DHL have made these big announcements, and they are deploying, and Amazon's deploying as well. But as of now, you don't, you as a customer, you don't get the choice to send your items in a zero emission way or in a reduced carbon way or anything like this yet. So I'm very curious to see when someone market tests this or maybe offers zero emission delivery as a premium or something like that to see if there's a demand for it, because I do believe there is a demand for it. Same way there's a demand for $5 cup of Starbucks coffee. So that people will pay a premium for a premium product, and I think that a more sustainable delivery practice is a premium product, and there is demand out there that has not been tested enough.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. James, would you like to add anything to it?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of rural deliveries, I mean, we don't do a lot of rural deliveries, but in general, I agree with the other panelists. I mean, the tough part is the density. So really, to make it cost effective, you're talking about consolidation, which means waiting basically and getting enough product to go. Obviously, we've got the U.S. Postal Service, which has the density. So if you can use USPS to do the deliveries, I think that makes sense. Make a contract with them or an agreement with them. And then I think rural deliveries are probably a good opportunity to continue testing out drones or autonomous vehicles, things that don't require sort of that labor. I think something like that probably can pay for itself depending on how rural you're talking about. So I think those are all some ideas.
Thank you, James. And Gina, any final thoughts on?
Yeah, just there are companies and technologies out there that are matching, freight to, particular areas, and rural is one of those. There's companies that are even looking at electric vehicles and, doing these LTL type moves to get that product into that rural area, and then that local community could really, I think, step in and that workforce there make some other deliveries. It just has to get creative is what I think for the rural, and leverage these companies out there that are doing some digital freight matching with what load is going where, and sharing that truck. So companies like Flock Freight and iShared are a couple for the panelists or even our guests to check out that do some of this cool stuff.
Great point. Thank you, Gina. Let's jump to the next question. This is a kind of a broad question and on your opinion, really. In terms of e-commerce and home delivery, do you recognize actually that e-commerce and home delivery practices have reached their peak only because of the pandemic, or do you think this is a long-term trend that will keep growing in years ahead? What are your thoughts on, from your experience and from your perspective? If that makes sense.
Selfishly, I hope it keeps going and growing and growing and growing, and that we get better at it along the way. I think we all as consumers are buying, differently, and we have some behaviors now that are going to be hard to change. But to Steve's point, I really think that it is a premium and it's going to get more expensive. There's lots of subsidizing going on, but for that premium, Amazon, for an example, will give you an option to consolidate, to have all your packages delivered on Monday now or Tuesday or whatever it is. And so I think there's something there that we need to explore and keep the last mile and the e-commerce rise and all these packages that we have coming to our residences in a more efficient manner. Because do we really need it now? Yes, in some cases. Boy, when I was raising my kids as babies, I'm sure I would have rather had something come right to my door that I needed versus having to load them up in the car and get to where I needed to be. And so there's just a lot of different things I think that now, we need to just step back and say, do we really need it now? And can we consolidate? What does that look like?
I mean, for sure. I think the e-commerce was growing before COVID. And I think COVID, if anything, has just been an accelerator to kind of push more people into that space to buy online, maybe when they didn't before, and now they feel more comfortable with it than ever. So I think it continues to grow. And I think that these questions and final mile delivery just has continuing, increasing relevance in our lives in the future.
Yeah, I'd say too. I have an anecdote just from my own personal experience. My in-laws are octogenarians. Because of the pandemic, I exposed them to how they could easily, order online, have things delivered, and now they're kind of hooked. They do this, very often, and they don't, have a constraint on their time. They could go to the shopping whenever they needed to, but they just find the convenience to be a factor that they're willing to, pay a slight premium for. In certain situations. So I think it's something that's now become part of everyone's daily behavior.
Yeah, I agree with Michael. There's certain things such as, online grocery delivery that I don't think as a family we would have tried or would have taken us a while to really try that before the pandemic. But once we've tried it and realized what the time savings were, even though there are some struggles, at least on the grocery side for delivery and the perishables and things like that, but in general, the time savings versus the additional cost that you charge for a lot of people, they're taking that trade-off, and I think they're going to stay that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much to all of you. And this, in terms of technologies, well, I know we've touched on this, but just if you want to be specific about something that you think is very important in terms of to boost speed and efficiency in last mile deliveries, what are the main technologies that are being used from your perspective?
Yeah, I can go. I think one area is always, finding the right place to deliver, particularly when you have a high churn in your workforce. And so in a scenario in a more suburban or rural area, maybe it's not as challenging because finding that house is not a problem. It's well marked. But knowing where the delivery point is, for instance, in an urban environment where that can be very different than a door front on a street, is one of the challenges I think that can be helped with technology, is finding the right place to go, to actually deliver that package or that pizza, whatever it is. And so that's one area that can be improved with better technology.
Definitely. Thank you, Michael. And Gina, would you like to jump on this next?
Sure. Yeah, it was really important when we built this, what we call Geodis zipline, is that we had that kind of secure breadcrumb history of the deliveries, so we knew in real time where the delivery pros are. And if you take that the next level and you are looking for a signature or a photo proof of delivery, you've got some ways and some checks and balances to let the technology leverage a good customer delivery experience. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about the customer experience. And if your neighbor got your package and never brought it to you, or, I mean, there's all kinds of things out there that can go wrong. And technology just is that enabler. And I think if we continue to, at least for my vision, as we develop Geodis Zipline, is that we continue to think about that customer experience. And then what is the brand's customer service? What, the calls that are coming into these companies, where's my package? How do we eliminate those? What do we do when the driver, the delivery pro can't get into a building, the keypad's not working or the code's not working? Sometimes we layer in for our customers a Slack channel or some other things that help just in real time get that package delivered, get it to the right place at the right time, and to meet that SLA. So I think it's going to really rely on technology, transparency, real time, and then just educating the delivery pros that customer delivery experience, they have a hand in it. So making sure that the human capital is as excited about the delivery experience as we are trying to impress upon them that we want them to be. So that I would definitely say there's a lot of growth in that area, but when you're starting with the customer experience and then tying the technology to that, I don't see how you can go wrong.
Yeah, there's just so much technology out there these days. The tracking, the geofencing, the photo PODs and stuff that now customers are, it's commonplace now. Customers are used to it. Gina mentioned lockers earlier, and some of the things that Michael mentioned. Where do you deliver in the big city? And some of the delis and local grocery stores and stuff like this can now accept packages in some countries and some cities. They're working on those types of technologies, and so I think there's a lot. There are people that are delivering your groceries directly to your fridge in your garage or directly into your apartment. I think there's a lot of growth in that area, and some of these will be experiments, cargo bikes and crowdsourcing and all that other good stuff. And some of it will stick and some of it won't, but I'm pretty excited to see all the new developments, because there really hasn't been a lot of new developments. Like if you went back, 10 years or so, how many new developments can there be for delivering stuff? Not that many, but now today there seems to be so many other options available. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, if I could add, I mean, just going back kind of old school, but the traditional, if we're talking about speed and efficiency and last mile delivery, I mean, we operate a fairly large fleet of vehicles, trucks and vans and that type of thing. So, going back to the basics, blocking and tackling, fleet routing, fleet tracking, making sure that we're getting as many stops per route, all those things that help on the cost standpoint, as well as making sure that all the customers get their orders. There's some, and as well, the data intelligence and analysis to basically track your progress. I mean, what's your plan versus actual? How much time are you spending at each stop? Where can you kind of make improvements and talk to the customers to find solutions that benefit the customer as well as your company. I have a little bit different perspective, because although I know the B2C side, which I think is mostly what we're talking about in this conversation, my company right now is mostly B2B, although we do have an e-commerce arm. But on the B2B side, it's really about, the carrier side, it's really about that fleet routing, fleet tracking, and being able to measure what you're doing so that you can improve. As well, the people element we talked about, the customer side. There's also the frontline employee side, your drivers, anyone who's interacting with the customer, and making sure that they're as much as possible part of your culture and incentivized properly, and all those types of things that make for a good experience for them as well as for your customer.
Those were all great points. Thank you very much. Thank you, James. So let's jump to the second part. I'll say that we're going to focus now a little bit more on sustainability specifically. Obviously, it is a growing priority, and we were talking about that. That is particularly challenging in the last mile, being such a carbon-intensive process. But how can we reduce a company's carbon footprint in the last mile? Stephen, I think you're the one.
I was like, how can we reduce carbon footprint? I mean, we can switch out the trucks to less polluting trucks. I think it seems to be kind of the simplest and yet challenging way to do this. But yeah, we're the way we move towards that goal is to electrify our delivery fleets and start to require that our carriers provide delivery with zero emission vehicles, and try to support that as much as we can. If that means with infrastructure, if that means vehicle access, or if that means changing the goods flow the way that we're doing things today, then those are the kind of things that we'll do to move in that direction. But I think that even prior to to this kind of climate challenge and reducing our carbon footprints, the delivery business has always been about efficiency and reducing cost and that kind of thing, which is a good thing. All of those things also drive less emissions, right? So that's been on the positive side. But I think now we're ready to take this next kind of big leap here into zero emission technology, which I think exists today. The ranges exist today. Most battery electric cars can drive 200 to 300 miles. The average home delivery route in the United States is like 80 miles in the urban areas and things like this. So I think it's kind of low hanging fruit from a technology perspective, but it is it does require a lot of other things to happen, in order to make that change.
Yeah, I was going to mention that obviously that has the biggest impact is the electrification of the delivery, vehicles. But I would say that there's efficiencies that can be gained and carbon reduction that can be gained purely by making routes more efficient,
right?
Spending less time idling. If you know exactly, again, where to deliver something versus driving around the block a bunch of times. Some of the things that Jamie's mentioned too, in terms of eking out that efficiency, that can help improve the carbon footprint of deliveries.
Yeah, I think we're all on board with going to more sustainable vehicles. Obviously, that's what's happening. There's tons of manufacturers out there trying to do it. The challenge that we found is that is the upfront cost. It's still 2 to 3 times as much as getting a diesel, even a cleaner diesel fuel truck. And a lot of the state of California, for example, provides subsidies for these vehicles, but there's not enough funding. So every time you want funding, it's like, oh, funding ran out, talk to us again in 3 months. So it's really that upfront cost and driving the cost down, I think, of new electric alternative fuel vehicles that will help drive widespread adoption.
Just alternative modes to making deliveries, consolidating more. We have a customer that went to overnight deliveries because less idle time, less traffic time, better routing. Michael's probably the expert on that, where there's going to be ways that you can, at least in the interim. I know Geodis, our ambition 2023 to reduce carbon footprint by 30%, is just great scratching the surface, right? But at least we have a program, we have one, it's heavily measured, there's teams of people on it, and you got to do your part when you're in the last mile business as a supplier, right? We got to do our part.
Yeah, and also in terms of different vehicle types, there's now companies offering e-bike delivery solutions, particularly for urban environments, which are very sustainable sources, not only just pedal power, but also electrification of those vehicles. And that can certainly help in very dense delivery areas. And so we're seeing a lot of those companies pop up, like EAV and Herb-E in the States. So I think they represent an interesting option, maybe not for large bulky items, but certainly for package delivery. It could be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So as you know, we've been running a poll with some interesting answer. I'm going to edit now and share the results with you. So you should all be able to see. The question was, how would you rate your last mile sustainability strategy on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being very poor and 10 being excellent? And as you can see, more or less, we are in the positive side, but still in the middle, I think. So from your perspective, James, where would you say your organization is on the last mile sustainability journey?
Well, I would give us probably a 5 or a 6. I mean, to be honest, I mean, I think there's, on the plus side, we are pros at doing the old school, driving stops per route. I mean, every B2B customer wants their delivery before 11 a.m. So, if we did that, we'd have to have a truck for every customer. But we do a very good job with gaining efficiencies in our routing, and so on that side, sustainability and efficiency, as has been mentioned, goes hand in hand. On the side of looking at alternative fuel vehicles, that type of thing, as I mentioned, I think we're probably still a year or two out. Seeing what's in the market and the upfront costs and things like that. There's been a lot of work with Class 8 vehicles, right? Tractor trailers, electrification, that type of thing. They're working more on the van side. We know with Rivian and Amazon and some of those companies. All our vehicles are refrigerated, and there isn't really a solution right now for refrigeration. We've tried a couple out that haven't really worked well. So we are always scanning that every quarter, looking at what can we do. But until we're able to do something like that, I think that'll push us sort of higher in terms of being able to be even more sustainable than we already are.
Thank you for that, James. And Gina, would you like to tell us, where do you think your organization, where is it on the last mile sustainability journey?
It might sound pompous to say a 10, but I'll tell you, Madame Lombard, our CEO, I mean, this is big for our organization, and it's at every facet of it. Last mile, same day, probably newer, or is newer. So we're still working through how do we, either through partnerships or, I'm designing a hyper-local delivery network where we can keep packages closer to the consumer, and so returns and and deliveries can coexist and not have to be packaged up to FedEx and UPS to go back to a sort center and then be processed. And so there's all kinds of ways that we can rethink last mile and sustainability. But for us, it's in the ethos, it's in our DNA. It's very much a golden rule for us. So I have to put us at a 10. With improvement, always with improvement.
We can always improve, isn't it?
Right.
It's
Right.
always like that. And Stephen, would you like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, Ikea is in a very good place in terms of our plans for sustainability. In fact, the zero emission delivery is just part of it's just one small part of our overall sustainability plan. Ikea owns wind farms and we have solar on the roofs of, I think, all of our facilities, and we've got charging available for our customers at all of our stores. And so there's a long history of Ikea's actions on sustainability, and this is part of it. So I would rank us, extremely highly. Gina said, like, there's always room for improvement, but we're right up there. So but I forget Ikea though. I really think that, like, from the last mile perspective, from a provider's perspective, that you really have to have a plan in place. And if you're a logistics company today, you should be listening to webinars like this and doing as much research as you can in sustainability, because these cities, I mean, look around the world, cities are blocking off whole areas and banning diesel and gasoline vehicles in city centers. And, streets are closing for more pedestrian and bicycle access and things like that. And, the advanced clean trucks rule, which is passed in California and now, being, considered in 16 other states, is going to, push manufacturers into producing more of these vehicles so we can get that TCO down, to James's point. So I think that, all of that stuff is coming. And so if you're a transportation provider, you really, if you don't have, if your plan is not at, 8, 9, or 10, then you really need to look at that closely.
Michael, would you like to add anything? Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, I think much like Gina said, I think we're very high in terms of number. I would only give us a 9 because there's always areas where we can improve, but we're certainly huge proponents of enabling the types of new vehicles that need specialized routing, specialized navigation, possibly. Companies I mentioned, Irby and EVMI in the UK that have these specialized electric vehicles that are sometimes pedal powered. We're very huge proponents of enabling their customers or them to provide the kind of logistics automation and efficiencies that we can provide. So yeah, we're certainly big proponents and love to help companies enable this new era of sustainable delivery.
Thank you for that, Michael. And to jump into the next question, it's going to be in regards to change management, which is a huge component of adopting new technologies and increasing sustainability as well. As I said, we talked about the technologies, we talked about the challenges as well, but how can we successfully implement technology in the last mile in a meaningful way? To you, James, if you like.
Change management. Well, depends, which group we're trying to change, or make them want to change, I guess you could say. I think that, there's certainly enough technologies, out there that are, that have really come around the last few years, at least that I've noticed. Michael's company is one. Companies like Bring, FarEye, OneRail, the DoorDashes of the world. That's all out there. I think that's really helping, push the market and show that options are out there and make it easier for consumers. So I think in terms of change management in that way, I think things are moving along. And some of these products as well, like Bring, for example, being able to really match the sort of order management and delivery side into one package. At least that's my understanding. I think that's pretty impressive. And so I think it's really eased the way for consumers to really try more e-commerce things, and the pandemic, as someone else mentioned, really pushed things along. So I think change management's already happening. I don't know that anything even needs to be managed. I think the market's sort of taking care of it. There's some regulatory push by government as well, but I think we're well on our way.
Thank you, James. Gina, we discussed this. What do you think are the initial conversations that brands should have in order to start changing something within the strategy?
I think they were forced to, right? When you have one distribution center for all of the United States and you're, in a pandemic and you can't get, capacity and trailers and drivers and labor shortages. And so it's organically happening. I've talked to more brands in the last 18 months than I have in my 37-year career. So, at least they're asking questions, right? We're getting calls and they want ideas. They want innovation. What are you doing? How are you doing it? How can you help us? They're already diversifying carriers. Obviously, the parcel providers nationally and regionally have had significant growth, even some pain points with their capacity. But I think the conversations should continue down the road of where can they utilize their store footprint, can they use a partner. The micro fulfillment is another area for which I think more brands could have some conversations around. That's where we do a lot of our, I'd say, optimization, where it's a low cost alternative for them to be able to take some SKUs and leverage a micro fulfillment option. So I think it's just continuing to ask questions, continuing to engage your providers. I mean, many years ago when I was doing this, and talking to companies about transportation, so many times it'd be like, oh, we got it, we're good. You know, if it's not broken, why try to fix it? And most of my panelists, and I'm sure people on the phone, are very aware of JIT and just in time, right? And then now we're looking at just in case, or or how are we trying to look at things differently? I think is the key question that brands should continue to ask themselves, and boardrooms really, you know, from the boardroom to you know, their supply chain professional that's on the line, asking them what do they think, engaging them into the conversation. You know, the first mile is just as important as the last mile right now in all these conversations, even from a sustainability perspective or just from a change management perspective.
Thank you, Gina. And Michael, would you like to add anything about change management?
Yeah, maybe slightly related to that topic. You know, one of the things that I remember from a conversation I've heard from DPD was they were telling me that in Amsterdam, I believe, they're adopting this sort of socialist approach of consolidating deliveries between DHL and DPD and other carriers in urban areas, so that essentially, you know, they share the space in a vehicle to make more efficient deliveries in some urban areas. I think that's kind of a change at a very, you know, macro level and a business level that cities are potentially going to impose on these delivery companies to make things more efficient. So I think it's an interesting, I don't know how widely that would be adopted, but I certainly see that potentially occurring in Europe, where there's much more regulation and focus on you know, low emission zones and those types of things.
That's interesting you bring that up, Michael, because I'm in conversations with a gentleman in Finland right now that has successfully taken the locker concept, where, you know, companies like me, the DHL, the UPS, and FedEx, were all sharing, you know, the locker concept for multiple pickups and deliveries. And then you'll also see brands like a Staples or Kohl's and others allowing you to drop off other brands' packages at their, you know, locations. So I think some of that is really good collaborations, right? The spirit of collaboration, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, rather than socialist approach. But I think collaborating to increase efficiency and sustainability is the right term.
And it reduces cost at the same time, right? Because if you can share those assets, I mean, it's definitely a win-win. But yeah, I mean, you really have to get comfortable with change management. I think if you weren't before, you probably are now. To Gina's point, you know, the supply chain disruptions and COVID and the rise of e-commerce and sustainability demands and legislation and things like this are all going to drive that. You know, I don't even know if you'd call it change management anymore. It's just like management now. You know, you're trying to. It's changing fast. The environment's changing fast.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I like that. It's just management now. Absolutely. So we are running to the end, but I wanted to touch this because we're talking about sustainability in last mile, and we can't really do that. We've talked about it here and there, but I'd like to know more of your thoughts about electric vehicles. So what are the current challenges for adopting electric vehicles in the last mile delivery, specifically in terms of infrastructures, and what changes need to happen to have this made, I don't know, quickly, let's say?
Well, I mean, there's so much to unpack there in that question. I mean, a lot of the stuff that you know, James had mentioned earlier about some of the challenges with electric vehicles is trying to find the right vehicle for your use case. In his case, refrigerated. You know, in our case, big and bulky, and you know, trying to find a manufacturer that'll do that, I think, is and provide a vehicle is a challenge. The cost, the TCO, is a major challenge at the moment. But since your question is focused on infrastructure, the infrastructure is an issue, because a lot of companies like Ikea outsource our home delivery operations, our logistics operations, to third-party logistics companies that do the deliveries for us. And so, you know, we can put pressure on those companies, but the infrastructure challenges that they face is if we're the only customer that's demanding this, are they going to spend the time and make the investment to kind of light up their own distribution centers with chargers and invest in electric trucks and things like that? And so I think it does take it's going to take a push from retailers and from customers, shippers to kind of demand those types of things. From our point of view, it means that if we have a third-party logistics supplier that doesn't have the infrastructure available today, it means we're going to have to create our own infrastructure at the only place where we have real estate, which is usually our stores, and our stores are not necessarily distribution centers. So so there's that, which means like we're going to have to move kind of our goods flow away from third-party logistics spaces and distribution centers to our storefronts, because you want that charging infrastructure to be as close to the point of origin of the goods as you possibly can. And so that creates this, this whole change in the way that we do business. And it also kind of reduces the value proposition for our third-party logistics carriers, by the way. So I think that, there's a lot there, but it is a matching of the use case too. I mean, I think at the very beginning, James had said earlier that people are talking about, Class 8 trucks and over the road and corridor charging and fast charging and stuff like that. And for my use case, that's, we only deliver when people are home to accept delivery. So we have long dwell times and we can get away with cheaper level 2 charging and, depot charging, and we don't need corridor charging, and their routes are not very, very long typically. So, all of those, there are many different use cases when you talk about the final mile. It's kind of lumped together. It's kind of final mile, but the reality is, there's a lot of different opportunities and use cases out there, and we just need a lot more infrastructure across the board for all of these things.
Yeah, I agree with everything Stephen just said. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, obviously we have our own fleets. Mostly we use 3PLs in some cities, but someone mentioned before, I don't know if it was you, Stephen, that the average delivery route is 80 miles or something like that. And I can definitely tell you that's true for us. We do have some longer ones, but yeah, I mean, in terms of infrastructure, it's, first it's electrifying your distribution space, your distribution center, that type of thing, which you probably don't own. You're probably leasing from someone, so you've got a landlord, and how do they feel about it? And by the way, could they pay for some of the investment? Because once you're gone, someone else can use that infrastructure as well. And you start with 1 or 2 chargers. What if you have a fleet of 30 trucks? That's a huge, upfront investment. But the good news is that if your, routes are fairly short, as ours are, that you don't really need the infrastructure on the road. At least for last mile for us versus over the road, as Stephen was mentioning. So, but you do need to make that investment, where you're distributing from, from your hub, that type of thing. And you need more charging stations, and you need them to be fast, as well. So, and I also had this thought as I was preparing for this. How about some sort of like mobile charging truck? Might be interesting, wherever you broke down or you need a charge to get back, and they could charge you in 10 minutes, something like that. I don't know, just throwing that concept out there.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I was thinking about this in terms of, you think about the transition we made from having to be responsible for charging our own mobile devices in the past. And now in airports, for instance, you can get a charging station at almost every gate. There's, USB ports on planes, et cetera. I hope in some ways cities ultimately also provide the infrastructure, whether it's solar powered or whatever, to enable charging of electric vehicles, as they also try to reach sustainability goals. They have to aid in that process as well. So whether it's dedicating space or creating the infrastructure as well to help enable this electrification of vehicles, whether it be small, large, et cetera. I certainly hope that they play a role rather than just pushing it back to industry to say, you figure it out, you figure out how to achieve these goals, but instead actually say, we'll help you.
Gina, would you like to add anything to it?
I
love the flow of the conversation, by the way. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
It's
no,
amazing.
I think my fellow panelists have covered it all. I love the idea, James, the mobile. I think we do have in the chat there, someone saying that they're coming up with that solution. Look, this is so in its infancy, but at the same time, there's lots of creative people out there coming up with things and looking at, as long as we look at what the problem is that we're trying to solve first, right? And from there, an idea like James mentioned about, mobile, okay, well, mobile, come to us, come to you. I saw in my travels in my neighborhood, someone had a mobile bicycle repair because there's so many bikes, and a lot of the kids in my neighborhood are on those electric bikes now, and they're breaking down, and the parent can call, or they can call someone to help them repair their bike. That's going to be mobile and get them back on the road. So I think we have a lot of very bright people out there, and I hope we continue to have the think tanks and then we look at the problem first and then go try to solve it.
There are mobile or semi-mobile chargers available too, so you don't have to, fast chargers that are essentially batteries that you can trickle charge from a smaller, from a lower power source, and then provide fast charging capabilities. And those are good for like leased environments and things like this that folks talked about. But I would also say that like the independent contractor drivers, these small micro fleets, which make up, by the way, 90% of delivery companies, according to the DOT, have less than 5 trucks. And so, where are these guys going to park their trucks, and where are they going to charge them? And those, the Ikeas of the world and the big depot companies and stuff that own fleets can provide depot charging, but we really need charging to be pretty much ubiquitous. Like Michael said, like everywhere you look, you need a charger in order to really accommodate those folks, those independent contractors, those kind of small mom and pops that run small businesses that have 1 or 2 trucks. Like they need charging too. So yeah, it has to really be out there.
Thank you for that, Stephen. Just in about 20 seconds each, we always like to conclude the conversation with on a positive note. I mean, it was all positive, but just in terms of, given the context of the conversation, so what excites you about the future of last mile delivery? Just in 20 seconds each, because we're running.
I mean, I think that for me, it's like all the change that's actually happening. I mean, I've been in last mile distribution for 25 years, and really all this change is happening right now. So I feel like I'm like, running downhill as fast as I can. There's so many things going on. So it is exciting. And there's, that part is, it's not just, warehouses and trucks and stuff. There's all of these other things that are going on at the same time. So super excited about just the trend in the industry.
Thank you, Stephen. What about you, Gina? What excites you about the future of last mile delivery?
Keep collaborating, keep engaging your partners. If someone calls you and you're a brand and you've got a logistical constraint, or you're trying to figure out first mile, last mile, everything into between, if I can't solve it, I want to refer you to someone that can. We're all, really in this together. So what excites me is the conversations now, the openness and the willingness to say something like, I don't know. I'm not sure, or let me ask someone, because I don't, I'd like to just keep those conversations going. It really makes my day exciting. So I think just brands and businesses and people like us on the, panelists, if we don't know it, then let's ask someone that might know it. So get curious, stay curious, keep innovating.
I'll be concise. I think it's exciting that there's so many companies out there that are contributing in so many different ways. And I think, as we've all talked about, there's so many models out there. The models that are going to work, we don't know those yet. It's not settled. And it might keep changing over time. So it's really exciting to see the different approaches that different companies are taking.
Thank you, James. And Michael, what excites you?
Yeah, just real quickly. So I'd say collaboration is a great point. Gina, I think collaborating with cities in particular to help, enable this new economy, which they have to recognize is here. It's going to be with us forever. And let's, work as both industry and government to try and achieve sustainable goals is something I'm excited about.
Great. Well, I think that's a fantastic place for us to wrap up. So to the panelists, To Gina, Stephen, James, and Michael, many thanks for your time and for sharing your thoughts with us today. It was all very insightful and thought-provoking for this discussion. And for myself, Reuters Events, thank you to the audience for tuning in, and we hope you'll be able to join us for our next discussion on last mile, which is actually happening just tomorrow at the same time. And make sure you register on our LinkedIn page, or feel free to email me if you're interested. Until then, goodbye, and I wish you a very great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.